Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance, good to see you. Delaney,
Good to
good to
be
see
here.
you. Lance, we have a philosophy that we don't talk about. We cover stuff the Wall Street Journal doesn't cover, but I'm going to deviate from that today. There was a great article in there about C stores, food, gasoline, and Casey's. And we were talking, and you said you are a big fan of Casey's. And one of the things that I think we need to do as underwriters is always be aware of margins.
Oh, yeah.
And gasoline margins 10%, and that makes sense. But Casey's, their success is prepared foods. They're pushing 60%, Lance, and people say they love it.
Well, the Casey's was not in my area about 10 years ago, Bob, and Delaney knows this. They came into Arkansas and built a couple of stores, and now they're everywhere. And the Casey's model, I have some experience, Bob, because I helped my dad build a Conoco convenience store on the interstate. And back then, your inside margins were critically important. Well, Casey's has an incredible gross margin on their inside sales because they don't just focus on soft drinks and potato chips. Casey's has a very robust pizza business in their stores. Guys, you can get your favorite donuts, all kinds of donuts in the morning, but Casey's is basically a restaurant inside a C store. And I know a lot of C stores will contract with, different fast food groups, but Casey's does their own.
Well, I was going to say, Lance, back in the day, C stores focused on the three food groups: nicotine, alcohol, and caffeine.
Yeah.
And they're doing very well. Michael, go to the next slide. And C stores do very, very well. Obviously, with I love your analogy, the restaurant in a gasoline station, but you can see gasoline sales are flat. Tobacco is declining. I don't know. We don't have the stats here for alcohol, but they're making up for it with food. And the reason why those so exciting, Lance, is for lenders. We're talking 60% margins.
Well, I think as a lender, when you're looking at a C store project, if you've got somebody that's doing a C store that's highly dependent on gas revenue and cash flow, there's not much cash flow on the gas side of the store. When we built the Conoco store 25 years ago, we figured out the profit margin was on what you sold inside. The gas was just a driver to bring the people inside. So when you're looking at a C-store project, you're going to need to ask questions about what are they doing inside? What kind of, prepared foods are they selling? How are they generating more revenue inside than at the pump?
No, very good. And here we go. Here, these are the number 7-Eleven's number 1, and there's Casey's number 3. And down the line. Lance, how do you feel about this industry niche? Are you bullish as a lender?
I still like the convenience store industry. I think there's a lot of opportunity in it, but I do think as a lender you need to ask hard questions. I've also worked problem cases, and I've had a few C stores on that side, Bob, and immediately I start questioning, what are you guys selling inside? Do you sell prepared sandwiches? Do you sell pizza? What are you selling on the inside to help your profit margin?
What's the number one reason for failure, in your opinion?
Not paying attention to inside sales. Gas sales, if you have a decent location, will take care of themselves. Let's face it, guys, gas is the same price at most locations. Pretty similar pricing.
It's a commodity.
So it's what you're selling inside that's most important. And if I have a borrower,
I'm sorry, Lance, go ahead.
If I have a borrower that don't have a great business plan for inside sales on a C store, I'm afraid of that borrower. But if I have one that has a great plan, I'm still very bullish on C store lending.
Lance, I should know the answer to this. I don't. On a gross profit margin, what percentage should be gasoline and which percentage should be inside sales as it contributes to gross profit? I'm not talking about top revenue lines, because
Well,
gasoline is going to outstrip that. I'm talking about contribution to your gross profit margins.
I'm not exactly sure what the percentage is. Typically, a good convenience store will have a 60-40 mix between gas and inside sales, but the inside sales is probably going to make up 80% of the gross margin.
Very good. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, very good. Fascinating article. Please go ahead and read that. And that's Lance. I appreciate your insight on that. And with that, let's turn to Delaney. Delaney, you're going to be busy today. What's going on? I love the all hat, no cattle stories. What did Mr. Michael do? I'll let you pronounce the last name. I pause and I'm not even going to try. Go ahead.
I wasn't going to approach it either. So
all right, fair enough.
Guys, our guy Pete Buttigieg, or whatever his name is, in the cabinet of our president, this is Budakoffer.
And with that, okay. Let's move on, Delaney. Just ignore whatever that was. I don't. This is the Delaney Fraud Friday segment.
That's right. I'm going to preface there is SBA fraud in this, I swear, but I am going to have to take us through a little bit of a cattle farming lesson, it seems.
I love it. Okay, go ahead.
So he was running a custom cattle feeding operation. So for individuals and investors across the country, he would send his employees from his company to raise and care for these cattle, and then he would sell them to a Wisconsin slaughterhouse. Now, I had to do a little bit of research here. I've never heard of the Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921. I will spare everybody the boring details. But as I guess a cattle feeding operation, and since he was selling cattle for other people, he would be considered a dealer. And as a dealer, he was required to have a bond, but he also convinced these people to let him sell the cattle under his name. And he also did not disclose that to the slaughterhouse. He said that he had the title to these cattle, and of course he did not. So under this act, he was violating the regulations for registration. So he should have been registered as a dealer. He should have had a dealer bond. And they also, under this act, have a requirement for prompt payment. So instead of giving the money to the people who rightfully deserved it, he was using it for himself. And under the act, he was supposed to give them a check or some form of payment within either that business day or the next business day. That did not take place. Now, I'm going to get a little more into the COVID aspect now. He did defraud the USDA out of $200,000. For a program they had, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. And then he also got a $1.5 million idle. He claimed that he was going to be using this money for his business as working capital, but instead he ended up using $75,000 to pay an attorney for his services related to a Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceeding. Now, I'm going to try and just keep this next little bit short. He lied during his bankruptcy proceedings. He had a situation with H-2A workers. That is essentially a program that allows people outside of the United States to come work for agricultural businesses in the United States on a temporary basis. And as such, he violated the Fair Labor Standards Act and Trafficking Victims Protective Reauthorization Act. And he also was, he got into some trouble for attempting to tamper with grand jury and trial witnesses. I mean, he's got a number of charges.
This is the definition of they threw the book at him, Delaney.
Wow.
You know, I'm not even sure what to say. There was a lot of interesting things. I had to do a lot of research. I've never seen something quite like this, but.
Yeah, this guy was all over the board with his fraud. USDA, SBA, cattle. It's a very interesting story.
Lance, are you saying the use of proceeds of an SBA loan, $75,000 to fund an attorney to file bankruptcy, is not an appropriate use of funds?
That's not an appropriate use of proceeds. But this story does bring up one good point, and I've had a loan like this. you can make a loan to farmers for the acquisition of cattle for a cattle farming operation. And it was one of the coolest. I did a $150,000 cattle loan. And what I loved about it, guys, is once a quarter, I had to get in my vehicle and drive out to the farm and count the cows. So that was a lot of fun.
All right, yeah, I'm a city boy, Lance. How much is a cow worth these days?
Oh, Bob, you're asking the wrong person. Now, my
All right,
brother
Delaney,
has,
we're going to show our ignorance here. I'm driving through the country and I see a cow. What's that worth on the balance sheet?
You know, I can look it up, but I will say it's going to depend on the kind of cow. I do know that.
All right. Well, at least you know more than the rest of us. Okay. Well, we certainly are showing our expertise here. Let's move on to romance.
Yes, this one was interesting. Mr. Benjamin, from 2019 to 2021, he was working with other people to create false dating profiles. And he would express romantic interest in his victims, saying, "Hey, I'm this person in the picture," which was not the case. "I have a large inheritance of gold, and I need financial assistance to either bring it to the United States, or I need money for a plane ticket, or I need money for medical expenses." And he ended up managing
How
to
sad. I mean,
catfish
yeah.
an undisclosed number of victims, but presumably it had to be more than one because he managed to get $1 million in scam proceeds. In addition, he also took advantage of the PPP program and got a $20,000 loan, to which he did not deserve.
Well, good. I'm glad, Lance. I know we've been talking about going after borrowers less than $100,000. I'm glad they're going after this guy, and good for the feds on this. I mean, this is just a horrible story.
Well, we actually had a couple of cases of romance fraud that we vetted out in our PPP loans. So it's a very interesting case there. You know, I guess the most interesting thing about PPP fraud is people came out of the woodworks and found ways to get people's personal information so they could fraudulently get a PPP loan. It looks like this guy was using the possibility of love as his opportunity to get this information.
Delaney, where did he live?
So it says that he was a dual citizen from America and Ghana, but he was residing in Ohio currently.
Very good. Okay.
Bob, I have some information, some breaking news. A Wagyu cow is worth $30,000. That expensive beef. A black.
I was going to say, come on, Lance. And I expect to know what a Wagyu cow is. Come on.
a black Angus cow is worth $12,000.
All right, I know what those are.
And a Longhorn is worth $10,000. Now, typical cow is not worth that much, Bob.
How about a dairy cow? How about dairy? How about?
Hang on and let Delaney do this story, and I'll text my brother and find out.
We're going to fact check Delaney live. I see we have a Corvette and a yacht.
Yes,
a Corvette, a yacht, and a Ford. Go ahead.
I thought you might enjoy this one. Now, I want to point out that this person, Lauren Owen, was from Oklahoma, and we a while back talked about somebody who got a yacht in Missouri. So this time we have a yacht in Oklahoma. To step back a little bit, Lauren was working for her employer as a secretary and managed to work her way up to a position as the vice president and sole financial officer. So she did all the finance books, the records for the company, paid bills, made checks. And because she did that, she decided to start writing checks to herself, make payments on her own personal credit cards, and make wage payments to herself from these accounts, and caused $750,000 of a loss to her employer. Once she got caught, she lost her job. So after losing her job, she applied for a loan on behalf of Platinum Assets LLC, a company she owned. And she lied that she had never been arraigned in a state court for embezzlement, had never been criminally charged, and she managed to get $384,000. Now, it didn't disclose whether it was PPP, EIDL, what program exactly it was, but these loan proceeds were not used for her company. They were instead used to purchase a 2018 Chevrolet Corvette, pay off the loan on a 2018 Ford F-250, and purchase a 40-foot yacht. And again, I'm going to say in Oklahoma, so I'm not sure where that's going exactly.
And how long had she worked for this company? Do we know? Other than long term. I
believe starting in 2010, and then she lost her job in November of 2021. So 11 years.
Red flag, Lance, I'm sure, is you have a long-term employee who you trust. We see this not only in banking. We've done several stories. The arsonist in Texas comes to mind, but also credit unions. You have a long-term employee who we trust, and over a period of time, they accumulate the power to control the books, and they start small, and next thing you know, they're in a yacht.
Yeah, they always start small, and that's a lesson. Small business loans, make sure your owner is active in the financial side of the small business, or things like this can happen. By the way, guys, just in from an expert.
I want to hear it.
A typical 600-pound calf sells for $1,200. A mama cow, as my brother called it, 2 to 5 years old, sells for about $1,200. So typical cows that end up being hamburger meat, steaks, and so forth, not the fancy ones, are about $1,200 a piece.
Very good. So the Black Angus at 12,000, Delaney said that's a luxury cow.
Luxury cow.
All right, very good. Give us one more, Delaney, and then we'll call it a weekend. Go ahead.
Okay, I will drop one more little piece about Lauren. She also evaded income tax, so it seems like 1 or 2 fraud schemes are never enough for these people. This is another interesting story here. Mr. William Dexter Lucas. He was sentenced to serve 97 months in prison and pay almost $300,000 in restitution to the SBA and to victimized car dealerships. Now, he first created a non-existent church to apply for the $50,000 PPP
I'm sorry,
loan.
I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh. Go ahead.
It's certainly not great. He created a church just to apply for a PPP loan, and he also used many aliases, up to 20 different aliases to apply for car loans across the country using fraudulent forms and financial statements. So he caused a total of $400,000 in losses.
What's interesting about this is the loss and the sentence he got, Delaney. Usually 8 years, you're talking tens of millions of dollars. In this, it was under $1 million, and he got 8 years. So obviously, there was the government and the judge wasn't too happy with Reverend Lucas.
It does say he had a long criminal history and refused to acknowledge portions of his guilt. So I'm sure that helps. They did not give the long criminal history, so I cannot inform you on what exactly he did. But it must have been pretty bad to get 8 years.
Yeah,
very good.
Well, he used a change in SBA regulations. Previously you could not do a loan to a religious institution. This guy took advantage of it. So, he should have. Well, I always say this, Bob. They should have known better, but he probably did.
Very good. Delaney, excellent reporting. Lance, thank you for fact checking us in real time. I now know more about cows and. Than I did before. And
that quite a cattle lesson today.
Very good. Thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street and rural America, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a nice weekend.